right, welcome to the Investor Coaching Show. Paul Winkler, talking about the world of money and investing. Thank God I don't do video work for a living.
Well, you can
Why is it, Stuart, that when you start to... My camera, video camera, has a setting for exposure, but it doesn't show up when I'm sitting there looking at it, and it did it yesterday just fine. You know, it's like... I would think that would work fine, but it's not working fine.
Okay, but you know, Paul,
yeah,
your drum career.
No. Don't even go there. Don't even go that I have too many hobbies and it's impossible to keep up with.
I don't know. You're getting paid to play drums. That's not a hobby anymore.
It's too many.
You are now
Where do we
professional
begin?
drummer.
Too many.
Where do
hobbies.
we begin?
No, stop. Leviticus, no piling on.
Yeah, Leviticus.
No piling on.
Where do we start?
Okay, so here's where we start. Mm-hmm. We got some big stuff going. I saw something and I thought, a funny way to start this segment, guys. Ann and Ira are here with me. This article, I just had to crack up at the title of it. So you have Market Watch, and they have this little advice column, right? Mm. And, the question comes in, here's what's going on. What do you think I ought to do? The most popular column this week is, I am 60 and plan to retire in March. I have $113,000 in my 401k and no other savings. But I'll get an early retirement of 9 months' salary. Should I get a pro to help me? And I'm thinking, no, get a pastor to pray for you. Especially when you look at, well, not only the savings, but you just look at this change in the tax laws that have just come into being passed.
Yeah, huge.
Mind-blowing.
100 changes.
Mind-blowing. And some of this stuff just makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. And I'm just looking at what is being written into this law, Secure 2.0. And I thought, we'll spend some time on the show walking through some things, trying to make some clarity out of mess. There are some beneficial things for some people. I know you guys saw that, of course, the RMD age, if you turned 70 and a half years ago, that's when you had to start taking distributions. Government wants their money sometime. And, they want to make sure that when you've put money into 401k. I had a conversation with a guy today, and we were talking about, he's about 60 years old, and he goes, I remember when 401ks, and he was actually talking about Roth IRAs more specifically when they first came out. And he says, I want to do that. And he said, I want to do that because I wanted to be able to have tax-free income in retirement. It just seemed like it made a whole lot more sense. And I said, well, yeah, a lot of it's the differential between your marginal tax rate versus your average tax rate when you pull it out. But a lot of people don't put the extra money that you should put into the tax savings, in other words, into the IRA, right? You got to put the extra money into the IRA. If let's say that you have a $300 tax deduction and you're going to, $1,300, let's just use that as an example, and you have $300 that you'll save in taxes, and you can go and put $1,000 in a Roth or $1,300 in the IRA. You can't just put the $1,000 in the IRA and get the tax savings and go spend it at Walmart. You want to make sure that you have actually saved that money into the IRA, because otherwise this guy would have been completely right. And so what's going on right now is there's a huge push on Roth IRAs. And, Chad and I were having this conversation. Why? Why is this the case? And it's the government really needs money right now. They need money right now because they're spending like drunken sailors. No offense to drunken sailors. But they are spending unbelievably, and they need revenue right now. So if they can get you to take more of your retirement savings, pay taxes on it, then put it in the Roth IRA, then they'll figure out what to do to your Roth IRA 20 years from now, right?
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And that's always been my concern when people say, well, should I convert to a Roth? And I had this conversation with a lot of my clients, and it's about you're going to pay the tax now, and maybe I'm a little conspiracy theorist. I think the government
conspiracy theorist.
I think the government's going to figure out a way to tax that again later.
No,
that's my concern.
No, that is always a concern.
I mean, look, what did people do when I first got into business? A lot of back in 1984. A lot of people were putting, wealthy people were putting all their money into tax-free bonds.
And real estate limited partnerships.
Well, forget that for a minute. Just the tax-free bonds.
Well, sure.
And why? Because they're very, very wealthy. They can live off their tax-free interest and not pay taxes.
And the interest rates were a lot higher.
Yeah. And the government came in and they created this thing called the alternative minimum tax.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
Okay, so now
brilliant for the government.
For the government,
yeah,
that's right. But you see, that's my point.
No, that's a great example.
Okay,
Ira. Yeah.
Another example is we had money, and we still have it today, siphoned out of our check to go into this thing called Social Security. And years ago, it was tax-free income to those who lived long enough to start collecting it.
Right.
Well, during the Reagan administration, it was actually signed that Social Security would now become taxable.
Yeah, up to 50% at that point in time. And then later with Clinton, and now at 85. Right.
So I'm always leery about doing the backdoor Roth IRAs for those who are ineligible for it because of their income up front. So they put it into the IRA, they let it grow, then they transfer it over into the Roth and do a conversion, and they call it the backdoor. And I hate when people come in and say, well, I want to do the backdoor Roth IRA.
Yeah, and then they have a big IRA someplace, and they have a big IRA, and they can't do it. They don't get the... it doesn't work. Let me give you the short version. It doesn't work. Keep going.
What irritates me the most about it is that is just a marketing term. Right. There's no thing in the code called a backdoor Roth IRA.
That's true.
It's a way that investment advisors and insurance agents have created in order to market something that you don't think you're getting or you don't know about, so they can get you into their office to then move your money into something else.
Yeah.
And it's not a backdoor.
And they never explain the aggregating issue. So then that's the problem. You may try to do this, and you've got an IRA, and when you have that IRA, you have to aggregate all of your accounts, and then you come to find out when you go pull off this little backdoor strategy, it doesn't work as advertised, and then too late, you screwed it up. Right. So that's so true.
Right. But the problem that and it's a lot of things that I see that advisors are doing that irritate the heck out of me because they have investors thinking that there's something special out there that nobody's telling them about, but they advertise it, the backdoor Roth IRA. It's like several years ago, I was meeting with clients in Miami, and Gus says to me, Ira, we've been with you for 20 years now. And we love you, and we're not going anywhere. But I just got to tell you, man, we've been having dinner seminars
every night.
We
go out to dinner every night.
Seminar. And do you think we need a stretch IRA?
They go out to dinner and get it paid for by an insurance agent putting on a workshop. Is basically what he's telling you,
right? But
or an advisor. I just got one in the mail.
Yeah,
and I was really tempted until I found out what it was.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah. Hey, this looks... And you know what I love? Is they go and rent rooms at universities to make it sound like it's actually academic.
Well, this one was a country club, and I thought, maybe,
that too.
Maybe I can go, maybe they're trying to get me to join.
Right.
So I was like, that might be good. But, well, no, that's not what it was.
But Gus asks me the question, do we need a stretch IRA?
Right.
I'm like, Gus, there actually is no such thing as a stretch IRA. What happens is, let's say your Edith doesn't need the income from the IRA, so it goes to your kids. So now they're younger, so therefore they have more years to take the money out. So instead of it happening over, let's say, the rest of Edith's life, we'll just call it 15 years.
Yeah.
Now your children have 30 years to take that money out. Less money is going to come out in the early years because they're young. So it has more time to grow. Well, the Internal Revenue Service just crushed that.
In
2017.
I saw where you were going, and I thought, this is brilliant. This is really good where I was going with this because, a lot of people did planning and went to these dinners with the intent that the idea would be that this thing would be around for a while.
Uh-huh.
And then, bam, gone.
Right.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
And you do estate planning the same way.
So true.
You have to try to predict what the taxes are going to be, who's going to die first, et cetera, et cetera. And really, the reality is you have to keep looking at it periodically because the laws change.
How many people have bypass trusts that have very little use anymore? Mm-hmm. I say very little because there are some arcane situations where you might have some use where it might be okay. But, for the vast majority of people, they did it for a whole different reason. And that reason became obsolete when you had the portability of the unified credit, So, and if you don't know what we're talking about, you need an advisor.
Well, another example is the Social Security.
Yeah.
All these advertisements for if you don't get it right, you can end up losing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of income.
Right.
And it's just not that plain and simple. It's not that cut and dry. I, as you both know, I went through cancer for the second time. I was diagnosed October 2020. Mm-hmm. So the first time I went through it was 2004, 2005. And, I was hoping to live to 87 when it was all done. And then as I got further and further away, I started thinking again that, I'm going to live to 99. And then I'm diagnosed with cancer again. So I battled 2020, 2021, and I'm actually now really beginning to feel like my old self again before cancer. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But up until, lately my thought is, well, should I start taking it at my full retirement age at 67? Mm-hmm. Or should I delay it until 70? Because whether I take it at 62, forget taxes and all that, the income, whether I take it at 62, my full retirement age at 67, or delay it until 80, the break even within a few $1,000s is going to be between 80 and 81. So I've got to bet what is going to happen to me.
Right.
Am I going to live much further past 80 or 81? I mean, how much, more money will I get if I died at 83? Am I going to really get that much more?
Well, you got the joint life expectancy issue, though,
Yeah.
With two of you.
Right.
So the reality is for a lot of people, you're not necessarily delaying your benefit. If you're a higher income earner, you're not necessarily delaying your Social Security because you're going to live a long time. But, it's a spouse, too. So you got to think about that. You got to look at the differential between your benefit versus the spouse's benefit. It almost always works out that if one spouse has a benefit that is less than half of the other, taking it earlier makes more sense. But that's off the table if that spouse is still working and their income is high enough where you have taxation of their benefit. Because if they're above the threshold, which it's got to be close on about $20,000 right now. If your income is above that, they take away $1 of your Social Security for every $2 over the threshold that you're at. And then there may be no benefit of taking it early. It may be better to wait till their full retirement age, which if you're born after 1960 or after, is age 67. So there are a lot of things to think about regarding that decision, more than just the person's life expectancy.
Well, and one of the other things that I point out to my clients is that if you need the income, there's only in most cases today that I see, people need income. There's only two places to get it. And that's number one, Social Security. And number two, an income stream off of your accumulated assets. Mm-hmm. So if you decide that, well, I'm going to take it out of my accumulated assets, you're depleting what could potentially go to your beneficiaries.
Right.
You cannot leave Social Security to anybody.
Right.
Correct.
It's not...
exactly.
There's no benefit
and a lot
there.
of people don't realize the annuity. You're basically, if you use an annuity, those assets don't go to another generation.
Right.
Unless you have one that does have the ability to have some remainder to it. And if they do that, they reduce your income so much that it would be ridiculous to even do that. It would be from a standpoint of cost of living too. I had somebody that was talking to one of my guys this week, and he said, I believe inflation is going to keep going. I believe it, and what somebody really believes doesn't matter as to what's really going to happen. People say, I believe this, and therefore, because I believe this, I ought to do this as an investment strategy. And I go, no, don't do that. Your beliefs don't matter at all when it comes down to what you think is going to happen versus what you ought to do. But, as I thought about it, the interesting point that he made is that I believe that that inflation is going to continue on. And let's say this guy's right. I mean, if this guy's right and you have 8% inflation, that means prices double every 9 years. And, you're looking at something that costs $10,000 right now in 18 years, costing $40,000, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just because it doubles, goes to 20, and then that doubles, 20 goes to 40. And you look at the math of that and you go, wow, this could be a huge, huge problem. Because a lot of people don't think about that when they're buying products right now, that they could be making decisions based on the current events of things going on right now. And that being that they hear that they have a guarantee.
Right.
And you have all of the end of last year. I mean, what did we hear? All of the research saying these people that were interviewed and talked to and polled, and they said, I think that 2023 is going to be bad. And I kept yelling at, as I was saying last hour, I kept yelling at the TV screen. Recency bias, whatever just happened, you think it's just going to continue on forever. Now, there are things out there. I saw an article yesterday. It was saying that these people thinking that the stock market's going to go up 20% this coming year. And some people think it's going to go up 40%, this coming year. Some people think it's going to be, but you hear a lot of people. The guesses are all over the place.
Right.
But I want you to get that they're guesses. That's all they are, is guesses.
Well, and I'm always amazed at how people kind of totally forget that just in the late 70s and early 80s, and a lot of our clients were around then, you had inflation of 18% and interest rates of 12 to 18%. And, I mean, it was,
yeah.
And they,
and who says we're not going to get inflation again? I mean, the reality of it, of that magnitude.
Right. But
it
here's
can happen.
The interesting thing is that was short-lived.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've had since then, what was the average inflation?
A couple percent.
Yeah.
It was actually below. And for quite a while, it was below the Fed target of 2.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And
So
people were
who
worried
can-
about deflation.
Right.
That's
right.
exactly right. So
Yeah.
you really don't know. That's why
Right.
diversification is so stinking important. And what happens when you go in and you make a move because of what you see happening around you, by definition, many times what you're doing is walking away from diversification. And that can be huge, huge problem. Tell you what, let's take a quick break, guys, and we'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Investor Coaching Show. Ira Work and Swaski. We'll be back right after this. All right. We're back here on the Investor Coaching Show. Paul Winkler, along with Ira Work and Ann Sawaski. So, back to Secure 2.0, shall we? Because we started out there and Squirrel came to the rescue and took me around.
Well, that's because Dana keeps feeding the squirrels. So.
She does, and she has not stopped feeding the squirrel. There was actually you gotta hear this. We got these handles, these U-shaped handles on our doors here, right?
Yeah.
And the outside the door, the squirrel has figured out that my staff likes to feed the squirrels, and one actually jumped up and grabbed the handle thinking he could open the door to come in.
Wow. That's a smart squirrel.
No kidding. No joke. No joke. So there is a video out there that this guy has, and he has a squirrel maze in his backyard, and it is amazing what these animals can do. It is absolutely amazing what they do. But anyway,
now you can
that's it.
now you're going to actually truthfully say we took a squirrel route.
We did take a squirrel route. We really did. Okay,
right.
so
Secure 2.0.
if you were 70 and a half, I said earlier, and you had to take a required minimum distribution, and you had to start taking distributions from your IRA account by April 1st of the year following the year that you turned 70 and a half, and you had to take, keep track of that. And if you waited till then, you had to take one later in the year. By the end of the year, you had to take a second distribution. Well, they decided to come in and, Trump had that bill that said, we're going to move that to age 72. And we moved the age to 72. And people that started at 70 and a half still had to do that. But, if you're 72, then you could push it off. Now, if you are turning 72 in the year 2023, now you are able to start taking that distribution at 73. You don't have to take a distribution this calendar year, 2023. You can wait till the following year when you turn 73 is the new rule. Easy way to remember this for you folks out there. If you're born between 51 and 59, and then what happens is then you've got that 73. If you're born
60,
be 1960 or later, then you've got
75.
the 75. So it's going to be a while before we get to that age 75, but that's the direction that we're going, is to a later and later distribution. A lot of people, this is confusing stuff, and I think it's probably good in a way. I've heard some negative commentary on this. On the 50% penalty, if you screw up and you miss an RMD, is going to be dropped down to 25%, and eventually it's going to be dropped down to 10%.
Well, actually, the way the law reads currently is that if you actually make the withdrawal and pay the tax within a reasonable time,
that's correct.
Then the penalty is only going to be 10%,
right?
Not 25.
Right. Yeah, and it's typically 2 years is the way it reads, to be exact about that. Yeah, so that is the issue right there, is that they'll reduce that distribution. Now, I've heard negative commentary on that, which is that you might have people that end up screwing up more often. And that the IRS, because the penalty isn't so high, because they weren't really good at actually enforcing that. They didn't do a lot of enforcement of that. And the concern is that now that the penalty will be lower, they're more likely to actually enforce it and actually charge it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's one of the big issues.
So think about it, because I have not ever read anything about the IRS actually imposing a penalty on anybody. Have you, Paul?
Have I read it about that penalty?
No. Have you actually ever read a news article about John and Joan Smith failed to take money out of their RMD, out of their IRA? They failed to meet the RMD requirement, and they had a $15,000 penalty.
No, nor had I heard anybody pay the 10% penalty when they took the money out before 59 and a half, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I mean, I would think that would be something that would make news, though. The penalty.
Yeah.
For
the penalty is
an older
big.
person.
50%. Yeah, true. That's true. Yeah, you got a good point. Maybe AARP would be all over that, like white on rice, right?
Yeah.
But so you have employers, with their matching contributions. The other interesting thing with these tax law changes, I thought was interesting, because a lot of you may have Roth 401ks out there. And when you had Roth 401k, the idea was that when you had a Roth 401k, you put the money, you pay taxes, you put the money into the 401k. And when the employer did the match, it was always a separate account that was taxable. It was always pre-tax, right? Yeah. Because the employer deducts the contribution, right? And I saw this thing in the tax law, and I'm going, well, wait a minute. They're saying that you can choose to either have a Roth IRA or do pre-tax, your choice. And I was saying to everybody, who would, in their right mind, not want the Roth feature and have that money tax-free in the future? It's because, nothing I had read about anywhere had spelled it out. And lo and behold, you get into the detail and you find out, if you choose a Roth match on your 401k, you're actually going to get it's going to be on your W-2, I'm supposing, someplace.
Yeah, it's going to be added on as
taxable income.
But they said it is not going to be subject to employment taxes, which is kind of good, So you'll pay your...
Now, help me out with that one, because it's not subject to employment taxes, yet a 401k contribution in general is subject to employment taxes. Why would the match not? I guess it's just because it's a match. Okay.
Yeah,
it wasn't part of your regular income. That makes sense to me now.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen that, Ann, but that
Yeah,
makes
I
sense
just
to me
read
now.
that today.
Yeah,
so.
because, so your employment tax is Social Security. In essence, folks, what she's saying is that typically you're going to have to, you'll have Social Security taxes on your income, unless you're above the threshold, which keeps getting higher and higher. It's 150,000, something around that this year. My good. And after that, you don't have to pay Social Security taxes. If you look at how much that threshold has increased, in other words, making more and more people subject to Social Security taxes, it has increased way more than the cost of living.
And the Medicare you still have to pay.
Yeah, that goes up onto
there's no
infinity.
cap.
Yeah, and infinity and beyond.
But not on that Roth match from
Buzz
the
Lightyear.
employer.
Okay, thought.
So
So the match, no, it's not going to be part of that. Now, what?
One of my concerns is that if I, as an employee, elect to have my contribution matched in the Roth, that if I don't make adjustments to my deductions, that I can end up with a surprise next year,
tax bill,
having to pay more taxes.
that's true.
That's a good
true.
point. So you have to be cognizant of that.
Now,
sure.
this is just, of course, taking effect right now. So I don't know if the 401ks are going to have to contact everyone and say, hey, do you have a Roth?
Yeah.
Now, are you choosing to have the new Roth contribution, and therefore we would change your withholding?
I don't know that anybody is set up for that yet. As from what I understand, a lot of companies are having a hard time getting set up to actually abide by the new rules. So
right.
This is just something to keep in mind. If you're a person that does a Roth, you'd be able to do that. Now, there is a negative to that we'll cover after this, because it gets really squirrely when it comes to what are called catch-up contributions. And we'll talk about what those are in just a second. You're listening to the Investor Coaching Show. Paul Winkler, Ann Sawaski, and Ira Work. We'll be back right after this. The new 401k plans have, maybe next to no administration costs, the new ones that they're talking about, because they don't have contribution limits any higher than an IRA, which just seems kind of pointless to me. And then the escalation clauses, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
People start, if you're going to have a 401k, you get people to participate. If you automatically enroll them and then increase the contribution every single year that they're there, you'll get people up to saving 10% of income is where it caps off, from what I've seen. And, a lot of people, it's not a bad idea to be saving 10 to 20% of income. That's usually a pretty good place to be if you're kind of wondering how much to save of your income and how to get there. That's a good way to get there. Just increase it 1% per year, especially for younger people. In your 20s, by your early 30s, you'll be saving 10% of your income. Keep going. Keep increasing it.
And the nice thing with the auto enroll is, you'd actually force people to opt out of it. Most people don't do that, which means they don't even really notice it's coming out.
Yeah.
And yet it's building up for them.
And then, as you start to increase your contributions later on, you learn to live on less, which is kind of a good idea to do that. Get yourself used to living at a certain level. Then when retirement comes, not a total shock to the system. The other thing that's going on with some of these Roth IRA 401ks, or let's say the non-Roth IRA 401ks, let's put it that way. The idea of a catch-up contribution. Now, you all know what that is. In essence, if you're over the age of 50, you're able to put more money into a 401k than under the age of 50, right? And now they have a second catch-up contribution phase, which is another increase in your early 60s. Here's the thing that's really weird. If your income is above a certain level, 145,000, I think it was, something like that. If your income is above that level, you can't do a catch-up contribution.
Right.
So they're basically saying, you have to do a Roth catch-up contribution. If you have a pre-tax 401k that does not have the Roth feature, you can't do a catch-up contribution. And from what I understand, nor can anybody else if you have one person above that income level, which is insanity.
That is.
Which I don't know. And that's basically what it is. Yeah, I found it right here. Here it is. Catch-up contribution treatment depends on income in employer retirement plans. If wages from the last year are above $145,000, inflation adjusted, so that's going to change every year to make it really fun to remember the numbers. Additional elective deferrals can only be Roth contributions. So you've got those catch-up contributions, an additional elective deferral. Problem. Not every employer plan has a Roth catch-up option. If the employer does not have a Roth option, nobody is allowed to make catch-up contributions. Notice this states wages and does not apply to self-employment income because self-employment income is tougher to determine until the taxes are filed because you got, that gets a little complicated. But it's just, wow. You could have a lot of people negatively impacted by this rule right here.
I gotta believe, though, that the 401k providers will be contacting their employers to change that provision in the plans because they're not going to want to have people not contribute.
Well, but it costs money to make those plan benefit changes, too. So, ka-ching.
Well, the majority of people out there are using prototype plans, so it's really fairly easy for the administrator to update the plan, and really, I don't think it costs that much.
Yeah,
Now, so if you're above those income limits, think about that though.
Well, I think
you still have the Roth is the only way you do the catch-up contribution.
Right, so they're really nailing you on the taxes.
They're nailing on you people, that are paying taxes at a 40% level.
Yes.
And sometimes even higher if you're in a state, right?
Right.
So now you got a situation where you might have a ton of tax money that goes the government's direction because it forces them into Roths. And that makes a bunch of money for the government. Really, really good for them.
So is that what Dave Ramsey means when he talks about a stupid tax? You live in a state where you pay state income tax. That's the stupid tax?
I don't know. I don't listen, so I'm not sure.
I haven't listened at all since he left WTN. I have no idea where
I didn't even listen then, so I don't know. I know nothing about what he teaches.
Actually,
people ask me all the time, do you do the same thing that he does? And I'm like, no. He's talking to people that are knee deep in debt, and that's not our audience.
Right. Well, actually, the fact is, I actually didn't even know who Dave Ramsey was until I moved up here and started working with you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And,
no, serious. People do ask me all the time. Somebody asked me today, are you affiliated with? And I said, no, he was on the same station,
right?
But we're completely different. So yeah, I don't.
But that is kind of a
really
stupid tax when you think about it. So I think there's something to be said.
Leave it to Ira.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing that's interesting is the 529 plan. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
The 529 plan, if you've had one for at least 15 years, that you're going to be able to move that money over into a Roth IRA. Mm-hmm. So let's say you have a 529 plan. The kid got a scholarship, maybe. I'm thinking that's probably what this is directed at. And now you don't have to go and take that money and pay it for school. And you're sitting there with a bunch of money in 529 plans. Well, previously you had to pull it out with taxes and a penalty, right, unless you used it for your own, or you changed beneficiaries and changed to somebody else. Now the ability to move it. Now the negative of that is you can't pull a whole lot of money. It's no more than the IRA contribution limits.
Right.
From what I understand.
$7,000.
What's that?
It was $6,000 or $7,000.
Yeah. So it's a very limited amount of money that can be pulled out.
And it's a total of $35,000 over the lifetime.
But
right. I did read.
But it's better than poking an eye with a sharp stick.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. But I did read you can actually designate different beneficiaries.
You can change the beneficiary.
So you could actually do more than 35.
Well,
because you could assign the Roths to different beneficiaries.
Oh, so you're going to give Roth money away to different people.
Well,
just can't do this for yourself.
529 money could be designated for different. Yeah.
Right. And but the point is and I get what you're saying. So the point that's being made here is that if you have different beneficiaries, the beneficiary of it is the one that gets the Roth money.
Right.
Correct.
Is the way that works.
Correct.
Well, but it would make sense, if I'm putting money into a Roth, into
For a
the
child
529 for one of my
grandchild.
kids,
Yeah.
and they
why
decide
not
not to go to
benefit
college,
them?
I think my wife and I should each get that $35,000 benefit to each of our IRAs.
Or the kid ought to for having studied so hard to get the scholarship that made the saving unnecessary.
Right.
Come on, Ira.
No.
Right.
No.
Well, that's what a lot of parents would do. Now, what I was
Boy,
reading
he's tough,
on,
man.
Yeah. What I was reading on that, though, is that they're recommending, because of the 15-year rule, is just set it up right away. Even just throw $50 or $100 in there just to start the clock running.
No, then they change the laws.
Well, you're
in
right.
16
Then
years,
we get back to
and
that
you can't do it
same-
anymore.
Yeah.
And you go, nah. Yeah, we got you now. Yeah. That's God, I don't know. I don't know. I don't, and it's not enough money for me to take that, because Brian and I were actually in here in the office in Goodlettsville. We were having that conversation.
But you know what?
And he goes, I don't trust that they're not going to change the law
Well,
because,
that's true. But I guess all you could do is, I always tell people, all you could do is really look at what it is now.
yeah, punt.
And yeah,
I think that's what you can do is punt.
But with all of these new changes, one of the things that we have to, just really be aware of is it took 2 years for the IRS to give us clarity on the 10-year distribution of an inherited IRA.
Oh, I know.
So this was just signed in December. I mean, not even a full month ago.
Well, yeah.
And we're going to have to get a lot of clarity from the IRS about how are they really going to intend this to be, done.
Right.
That, IRA, it's a really good point. When you look at that 10-year rule. So if you inherit an IRA and you're not a spouse, you have 10 years to distribute it. There are a couple exceptions if you're under the age of majority and you're within 10 years of the person that owned the IRA. And, there are certain things that are exceptions to that. But just in general, you have 10 years to get the money out. And what they figured out is if the person was actually taking required distributions from the account, they were over the age of 70, 72 now is the age. If they were over that age, they were taking distributions. You have to continue based on their schedule. And then you continue it for 10 years. And in the 10th year, you got to yank the rest of the money out. And, so that was the rule change right there. So if you don't get what I just said, I can't blame you.
Because come in and talk to us.
It's really complicated.
Yeah.
So in essence, they're 72. They're 72. They look at the life expectancy of a 72-year-old married to a 62-year-old, and they were taking distributions. And now you, the inheritor, even if you're 40 years old, have to take distributions based on their life expectancy, married to somebody 10 years younger than them. Okay, so it may be 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%. If they're up to age 90, it might be 10% distribution per year. Well, what will happen is you'll do that for 10 years. Then in the 10th year, if there's money still left, you got to yank the rest of it out, is the way it works. If they were under that age, got 10 years, period, end of sentence, you're done. You got to pull it all out in 10 years and then take all of those distributions. Well, for a lot of people, that's a ton of taxable income because it may be on top of, or it will be on top of any other income that you earn.
Right.
So that is a far cry different from what I got when I inherited my dad's IRA, my dad and mom's IRAs. And what ended up happening is I got to use my life expectancy. So I basically get to pull it out, 5. That's actually less than 4% of the account value every year. And I can do that for my life expectancy, which is super nice.
Well, you had about, under the old rules, an inherited IRA would be depleted somewhere around the age of 85, 86.
Well, exactly.
And that's a huge difference.
Yeah, if you're 50 when you inherit.
It is.
I mean, that's 35 years. I mean, think of the growth that can have over 35 years.
Right.
And this is, and this is an example of the reason why I am cynical about what the government might do. The Trump Tax Act in 2017 lowered all the rates, but they also took away our ability to allow our inherited IRAs to grow.
Right.
Now we had 10 years to get that money out. And it only makes sense when you think about the fact that the government needs X amount of dollars to run. They have electric to pay. They have salaries to pay. They have Social Security. They have Medicare.
In Ukraine.
They have all of these entitlements. They have to pay them.
Just
They,
kidding.
called liabilities. So the only way you pay liabilities is to have revenue. So if I cut revenue from my left pocket, I have to have revenue coming from my right pocket, going into my right pocket. So again, this is my concern about that. As that backdoor Roth IRA and these Roth IRAs that they're recommending that everybody fund now, because yes, they're going to get more revenue now.
Yeah, what's revenue 2.0 going to be down the road?
And
Where
they
need
could,
more revenue.
And they can figure this out because they can just demand all of this information from the IRS. They know how much money is sitting in inherited IRAs. They know how much money is in traditional or pension plan. They have all this data, thankfully, to these wonderful little devices called computers and the forms that the investment firms send them.
Right. So quickly, just before this break, one of the keys, one of the things to take away from all of this conversation, because this can be overwhelming, is you need to diversify not only from an investment standpoint, but also from a tax standpoint. It's one of those things that we talk about. We're not against Roth IRAs. I like pre-tax. I like Roth IRAs. I like non-qualified accounts because they're taxed based on capital gains tax rates, which have always historically been lower, but not always. So the thing is that as an investor, one of the things that we look at is how can we diversify to protect ourselves from what may be coming.